Um. Oh, one second. I just have to unmute you.
I just unmuted myself too. I muted myself because I was going to grab headphones and then the YouTube video started streaming through you, and that sucks.
Hey, everybody. Sorry for all that boomer shit. We're ready to start. So we're going to be talking about the decline of America into tyranny, into the complete and total shit show we have now.
Okay, so I think we should start out. We shouldn't, if we're going to talk about America, the problem with, say, talking about America and the American system of government is that you, in your high school and middle school classes, were taught American history, and American political history begins with the American Revolution. And that the United States is born out of this revolution. And you're taught the American Revolution is the most liberal thing ever, and it's like the beginning of history. That's what Americans get, this impression that the American Revolution is like this beginning of history, and that's because that, and some of it's due to laziness, and it's due to just being fucked and not having enough time to prepare for that. But Americans get this impression that the American Revolution is this real, actual revolution, and they don't understand that America was founded with Jamestown, and was founded in 1607, and that American political history needs to go back into the conflict between the crown and the parliament, and the Jacobin or the Jacobites and the parliament, and these Catholic kings, the Stuarts, and the Protestant parliament. And that the Americans were just Whigs that were part of this Anglo-Saxon stream, this Anglo-Saxon civilization, and they're Whigs who are in revolt against this monarchist who's trying to retake his power, George III. So if we're going to talk about America, we have to start America with, we have to start it with Cromwell. And the system kind of, are you here, Arjun?
Yep, I'm listening. I'm just letting you talk.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
You're okay. Just what you're saying is the problem with understanding American political history is it's treated as if it's like some sort of young earth creationist thing where America just started to exist in like 1976. No, sorry, 1776, and like nothing existed prior to that.
Mm-hmm. And so you have the parliament, and we have to understand that when in liberal democracy is kleptarchy. And so when an African country says, I'm going to be a liberal democracy, when a former Soviet republic says, when Ukraine is like, let's be a liberal democracy, what that means is let's have kleptocracy. So you have this battle between this monarch, right? And you have in the English Civil War against this rising tide of kleptocracy, which is created by the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution and the advancement of capitalism, which makes the idea of a king ruling essentially impossible. Charles I, this happens in England first, and it does in a way happen with the Netherlands, with their revolt against the Spanish. But Charles I, first in England, and what ends up happening is that this developing mercantilist and the communist understanding of history, like these capitalists, these bourgeois they're going under, supporting the Roundheads, supporting the parliamentarians as they gain power, because the only way for a middle class that's rising in the succession of the rise of the Industrial Revolution and the beginning of early modern capitalism, the reason that legislatures become so powerful and essentially is the Canadian system and the British system now. It's a dictatorship of a single unicameral legislature. Is that fair?
Yes, there's theoretically two legislatures, but in practice, it's irrelevant.
So in the prime minister system, based off the U.S. or based off the United Kingdom and what it's
Oh
exported all
no,
across the
sorry. Let me
world.
just
Yeah?
interrupt you. I think you mean a fusion of powers, because the prime minister controls both the legislative and executive branch. Um,
Yes, yeah. What I'm going into is that there is no executive system. The prime minister has no executive. And originally, you would have an executive power, which would have been a monarch, or he would have been an elected monarch, the head of a republic, or a doge. And I guess in the 20th century, this elected monarch takes the name of a premier, or I guess like a military strongman often. But
mhm.
and as we enter into the modern world, the executive who gets his power through either inheritance or more vulgarly in military dictatorships, seizes it through force, or in a Soviet style system, you have executives that are um, selected through the Politburo system, through the party slash Politburo system. So you have these executives which were never chosen through popular election before.
Right.
Now we have a fusionism with the rise of the kleptocracy of the legislature, and the legislature holds all power. And because these prime ministers are coming through a legislature, you get these creatures like Justin Trudeau, or these creatures like Boris Johnson,
Right.
right? These like or Tony Blair, these creatures that they're not competent with running a state. They're essentially very clearly and very transparently working for an oligarchy, which is controlling the country, which has arisen in this rise of capitalism in the early modern era as the economy became more advanced and as this rising bourgeoisie sought its power through a legislature. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And I mean, you can interrupt me if you have anything else to say here.
Yeah, I'm just letting. I will.
Okay. Do you have anything to say, or should I continue?
Well, okay. Just to kind of maybe summarize a bit. So what you're saying is the mythology is that liberal democracy was about freedom and equality and rights for the average person, when really it was just about the upper middle class saying we want to get in on the grift. We aren't. The system isn't giving us Gibbs, so we're going to change the system so it gives us Gibbs instead of the nobility.
Mm-hmm. Because the nobility is not the nobility, or what I'm trying to say, this executive that existed beforehand, this executive power in the form of a monarchy, in the form of a hereditary monarchy and a nobility, in the form of an elected monarch, which would have came out of nobility as well, or the form of in a state like Mexico, right, in the Caldillo era of Latin America, in the form of this continual military power, or in the form of a single party state where you have this executive. These people are not working for this kind of like this kleptocracy class of these scoundrels. Because now I guess I'll get into like, political language here.
Oh, if I could just
How I describe something.
if I could just interrupt. So, is part of what you're saying under these other systems, people have more of a long term view because
Yes,
they're not worried about electoral cycles? Also,
they're
they're
not worried about electoral cycles, but they're also, these executives are either working for themselves or they're working for a class. And if they're tied to that and they're not tied to electoral cycle, where they're essentially a slave, this indirect, transparent slave to the capital class, then they're able to represent the great mass of people, the workers, if you will. the common man. Now they could choose not to represent the common man, but they're essentially against this
They don't
this
normally
legislative
last very
class. They're
long.
forced. They will never last unless they do work for the common man. But with the rise of the modern system and the rise of the legislature and the demise of the executive ruler, in the final rise of the liberal democracy as this global system of governance, which is almost universal, save for a handful of communist states, military dictatorships, and Muslim theocracies. This single legislature system is becoming more and more common, where you have a prime minister who takes over this fusionist power, who is part of this legislature, which acts as like is a transparently created by an oligarchy.
Right, like in Canada, there's effectively no checks on the Prime Minister's power. Because keep in mind, we have, in Westminster systems, you have extremely strict party discipline. So you don't have people vote against their party. If people vote against their party in Canada, they get kicked out immediately. If they criticize the leader of their party, they get kicked out immediately. So whenever I see American politics and I see like John McCain or whatever voting against the party line, and the idea of like swing votes is just incomprehensible to me because we just don't have that in Canada, like ever.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, and I hope I established the making of the modern world here. So
Sorry, just
yeah.
something. I think the other thing, and I hate to kind of pull mold bug or whatever, but I think the idea and why a lot of like NRX people will defend, if not monarchy, a one party state, is because if it's the property of the person and they're going to be in charge of it for the rest of their lives, then it's not like they need to just loot the state, then flee and pass it off to the next person to solve the problems. I think that is an issue. A lot of if military dictators act really poorly, I think in a lot of cases they probably don't intend to rule for too long. They just want to get their Swiss bank account and then run away.
Mm-hmm. I think that's absolutely fair, and I'm saying that military dictators ended up taking on this executive role sometimes, occasionally, with a character like a Franco. I think it's fair to say that there. But you're in the third world. Generally, you're right. These people are running a country until they're overthrown, and then they're literally built like a Marcos in the Philippines is literally building up a Swiss bank account, and he's extorting wealth through the country. Right, or Suharto in Indonesia.
Because you do have situations like you have like Lee Kuan Yew, you have you have I forget what the party's called in Botswana that's been in power for like 40 years. You have the Liberal Democrats in Japan. You do have a number of situations where the country's de facto not what we would consider a liberal democracy, but things actually run pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not like every country that's run different than the American way is, or no, or just any country that doesn't have like changes in government every 4 years is a shit show. I mean, once Russia became a one-party state, it got incomparably better than it was during the supposed more democratic period of the 90s, which was one massive shit show.
Okay. Do you want me to continue on?
Yep, go ahead. I was just kind of giving my hot take.
So, the Americans form immediately after the revolution, where these Whigs rise up against this kind of like George III is this last hurrah of monarchical power, and then after that, the Whigs will take power indefinitely in the Anglosphere.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so they establish the Articles of Confederation. The United States are these United States. We talk about Virginia and as part of this loose confederation. This falls through, and then the people that we call the founding fathers essentially act in this highly conspiratorial fashion and then create this central government based off of these Lockean principles, these Enlightenment Whiggish principles, after these people fought for their independence and created this independent confederacy, which is very loose. So then these founding fathers, and we don't talk about this when we talk about American history, they form this secret conference and create a like in a highly secretive fashion, form a new constitution, which forms a federal government. And at the beginning, comparatively in world history, it's not very powerful. But they form this federal government, and immediately these people that are these founding fathers that form this federal government, they have 2 terms under Washington, and they have 1 term under John Adams, and they're thrown out, and then the people that oppose this federal government take control under Jefferson until the era of good feelings. So anyway, then Jefferson takes control of the government. But
sorry, can I just
yeah,
how do you feel of the I just call them the Republicans. How do you feel about the Republicans versus the Federalists?
well, I think the Federalists, their system as they ran it isn't equal. And if the United States was to become a world power, it would have to be Federalist.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm trying to get into is that you have these anti-Federalists, which were these people that weren't part of this secret committee, this secret society is going to form this federal government, and see all their states, which they viewed as these independent, and there's a reason they're called states and not provinces, and that's why. And they're going to see themselves thrown out of this states and see them become provinces, and they're going to oppose it, these anti-federalists. And we would get to a character like George Mason. He's going to look at like this Constitution. He's going to be like, what the fuck is this thing? What's this Supreme Court? This Supreme Court, which has never existed in the history of the world. So the prior history of the world, and the way that even today we're trained to think, is this conflict between a legislature and an executive. And in the United States, they end up creating this executive, which doesn't exist in many other countries. France does have an executive, though.
Oh, well, no, just stop you there for a second. France had extremely weak executives, with the exception of, like, Napoleon III. The lack of a strong executive is what...
No, I mean de Gaulle's Republic, he recreated an executive.
I was just getting to that.
The president is an extremely weak executive.
No, I'm just saying, prior to that, it was a large reason why France was so unstable and kept collapsing. And de Gaulle massively centralized power in the position of the presidency, and it's been a lot more stable since then.
But anyway, so the United States forms an executive, a very weak executive, but it's maintained this executive over and against a legislature this whole time. But from my understanding, in the entire history of the world, there are tribal societies which were Kritarchies, famously in the Bible in the Book of Judges, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe Somali society is also a Kritarchy, and there's African societies which are Kritarchies. But they create this 3-pronged system, this federal government with 3 branches, instead of the British government with these 2 branches, and the executive is supposed to take on the role as the judiciary, and now we create this new independent judiciary based off Montesquieu. And like this, George Mason's like, what the fuck is this thing? What is this Supreme Court? This Supreme Court is going to have power over judging the Constitution. And it's going to just grow this, it's just going to grow all this power. And it's going to have more power than this executive. It's going to have more power than this legislature. And this thing hasn't existed in the history of the world. What kind of Frankenstein freak show fuckfest is this Kritarchy? What is this Supreme Court thing? So anyway, the Federalist rule, the Supreme Court is all that. It's just this court that answers to the judiciary. These Federalists, they were basically the group of founding fathers minus one founding father, right?
Mm-hmm.
This founding father of these 7 founding fathers, George Washington, Federalist, the 7 great founding fathers: George Washington, Federalist; Alexander Hamilton, Federalist; John Adams, Federalist; John Jay, Federalist; Benjamin Franklin, Federalist. Am I missing somebody here? First 5. Did I say Madison?
No, you didn't.
Madison, Federalist. One single anti-Federalist in the 7 great founding fathers. This Thomas Jefferson. Now, this Thomas Jefferson is going to take power in what they'll call it the Revolution of 1800, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So Jefferson takes power for the anti-Federalists, and guess what happens as soon as he takes power?
Nothing.
Mulberry versus Madison.
Oh, okay.
Mulberry versus Madison. It's not as soon, but when he takes power, this judiciary, which George Mason, this anti-Federalist, is seeing, what is this freak show? What is this fuckfest? What is this thing? As soon as these anti-Federalists take power, and John Adams, he's trying to stuff these courts. He's trying to stuff the Supreme Court as soon as this Thomas Jefferson takes power. So maybe that kind of clues us into this rising Kritarchy. So we have Mulberry versus Madison. Not immediately. I say immediately, but is when Jefferson takes power, this Supreme Court, just as George Mason said it would, exerts its power. And it says that it can judge the actions of a president, this executive, and the chief legislature, the Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. It can judge them unconstitutional. So now it's not a 3-pronged system. It is a system which is going to be led by the Supreme Court. And this, Mulberry versus Madison thing, we point back to it as the first instance of this judicial review, where the Supreme Court is the head of the government. So anyway, Jefferson. So the Federalists.
Sorry,
collapsed.
just interrupt for a second. Because traditionally, isn't the position of the head of state that you're only accountable to God, and that you can't be judged by anyone? And that's kind of how the Supreme Court is, because they're only accountable to God.
Well, they're accountable to the now they're accountable to the international oligarchy.
Yeah, but I mean they I'm just trying to think of how to describe it. Can you even impeach a Supreme Court justice?
It has been one time in the history of the United States. It cannot happen.
Okay, there is no...
Theoretically, it's possible, but it has never been done in modern American history in a single time.
I was just thinking about it for a minute. If a Supreme Court justice committed murder, and then they took it to the Supreme Court, they could vote to... Oh, no, I guess they have to recuse themselves. Yeah, I don't know. It's fucked. Keep going.
So anyway, what ends up happening is this even though it takes this power over and against Jefferson, it doesn't actually matter, because what's going to happen is that the Federalists will decline, and they're not popularly supported, and Jefferson's party, these National Republicans or Republican Democrats or whatever you're going to call them, they, during this era of good feelings, the Federalist Party and the Federalist faction rapidly declines in power, and Jeffersonian democracy takes off, and we actually have an era in the United States called the era of good feelings, where the United States was a single party state. So there's no reason for the Supreme Court to exert its supreme power again, and essentially does not exert the supreme power until the 20th century, because it does attempt to exert supreme power over Jackson, but Jackson famously, during the whole civilized tribes crisis, where the white people who LARP as Indians were forcibly evicted by Jackson into Oklahoma, and their land was broken up and redistributed to poor white farmers who identified as white or identified as Scots Irish, is redistributed to them in the Appalachian Mountains. The Supreme Court, as Jackson himself took over a revolution, because we have to remember Jackson. I'll look it up here. What election this happened, what year? I think it's in the 1828 presidential election. No, it's the 1824 presidential election. We have to understand that Jackson is essentially denied power in the 1824 election, even though he wins the election. And he's denied power through this very bizarre system of if no one wins a direct total electoral college victory, that the Congress can overthrow it. So Jackson arises, and Jackson is this highly populist, almost quasi-dictator figure, if you will, an American Napoleon, who is indifferent to the rule of law, establishes a spoil system, overthrows this single-party state that Jefferson essentially creates, and then James Monroe presides over in the era of good feelings. So then Jackson arises, establishes, a quasi-American dictatorship, but he tries to arise originally through the single-party state system, and this kind of like this good old boy club of this legislature kleptocracy class, right, as I already said, that denies Jackson election through the extremely bizarre system. If nobody wins a direct majority, despite having the majority of votes, the Congress, the legislature, can directly select the executive based on their own preference, regardless of the popular vote. So then they select John Quincy Adams. Jefferson ends the two-party system, founds the Democratic Party, wins in a landslide against John Quincy Adams, takes control of the federal government, extremely popular general, establishes Jacksonian democracy, which is this highly popular system, rule, and then the Supreme Court attempts to have power over Jackson, and then is explicitly denied during this civilized crisis and land redistribution phenomenon. And Jackson uses, we have to understand Jackson is a dictator.
Right.
He is, basically a dictator in the Chaldeo sense. He is a Chaldeo, an Anglo-Chaldeo, if we're going to understand the Latin American concept of a Chaldeo, this military leader who rules as a strong man through his popularity. And Jackson not just denies the Supreme Court, Jackson annihilates the U.S. banking system created by Hamilton. Now, and that does cause a recession, and I'm not a Ron Paul guy, and
I actually kind of disagree with that, but maybe I just
Are you anti-central bank?
No.
Or pro-central bank?
I'm pro-central bank.
Yeah, I don't agree with the Jackson abolishing the central bank. So Jackson abolishes the central bank system, and because of that, it causes this recession. Martin Van Buren succeeds him, but has one term, and you see the rise of the Whig Party in this opposition to Jackson, and the American system of democracy is maintained again. Van Buren is defeated in his second term, and now we have a two-party system again, because we go from a one-party system under Washington. The Anti-Federalists reemerge as the Jeffersonians. The Americans widely support the Jeffersonians, these Anti-Federalists, and we have a single-party system. Jackson rises. Jackson basically rules as a military dictator to a certain extent, or a Chaldeo. I shouldn't say military dictator, but he's definitely like a Chaldeo. And then we have the rise of this Whig Party when Jackson leaves office, and then we have a two-party system with the Whigs and the Democrats until the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And then I believe there's some shenanigans with the Supreme Court in the Civil War, but they fall under Abraham Lincoln. So the shenanigans, and we don't have the shenanigans of the Supreme Court acting as a Scalia would say, the supreme legislature. So let's get back to the 20th century, right?
Right.
And we again see this rise of the Supreme Court as the supreme dictator. So we have, let's go back to Franklin. That's where it starts. So we have FDR. I don't know. Do you hate FDR? Do you like FDR?
I have
Are you anti
mixed
or
feelings.
pro or mixed feelings?
How do you feel about FDR?
I'm not anti. I'm not pro. But FDR tries to establish a electoral agenda. And we have to understand is that there's not 9 Supreme Court justices in the Constitution. And this sounds really weird, but court packing is actually legal under Constitution.
No, it is. It's completely legal. Although, because I don't know exactly how America works, because in Canada, because we have a more British-based system, tradition is the same thing as law. So, I think you could make a legal argument in Canada that court packing would be illegal, even if there's not a formal law in the books. But I think America is a much more litigious society.
Well, America is a constitutional society, and the Anglo system isn't. It's a precedent society.
Mm-hmm. Although you have the worst aspects of both.
Yes, we do. So anyway, the Supreme Court that was set up before the rise of Roosevelt, and Roosevelt is, again, this highly populist, not militarily strong man, but he can boss everyone around through his massive amount of popularity, through his institutions of being a social democrat. But anyway, so you have all these Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices who resist Roosevelt. So Roosevelt attempts to overthrow them and pack the court. The Senate says, no, you can't do that. Because we have to understand, under the Constitution, and we should think of this as a way to dissipate this supreme power of a Kritarchy, is that you could pack a court and make the Kritarchy go away. That would actually end the Kritarchy, this Frankenstein system, which is neither this dictatorship of the mercantilist, or, like, it's actually a much worse version
Sorry,
of that.
how would that end the Kritarchy?
Because if you pack the court, then that means the legislature rises again. You could have a legislature versus executive system, or just a legislature executive system. Because if you pack the court, then the court that you're going to get is going to be put on by, well, so it's this Montesquieu system of checks and balances. So in order to adjust the number of Supreme Court justices, you would need to have the legislature agree to adjust them and change the number. But the executive would appoint those Supreme Court justices. So it would break the power, and it would have to be done in unison with this legislature and this executive to break this power of this Kritarchy, but they've never done it. And it starts here with these senators rising up against FDR's power and denying him the packing of the court. The court, from that point on, and I believe it's had 9 sometime before that. I would have to look it up officially, and that's kind of out. So now, from that point, it is essentially quasi-constitutional that is locked at 9. And the Supreme Court then, under these, because FDR then lives through World War II, and all these people that were appointed under Harding, under Coolidge, and under, now I can't remember the one before Coolidge, Teapot Dome scandal guy.
Warren J. Harding?
Harding, and then Harding, okay, Hoover, Harding, and Coolidge. So we have these 3 presidents over 12 years that appointed the Supreme Court, which opposes FDR. FDR lives into World War II. He replaces the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, because FDR is the most left-wing president the United States has ever had. He has very many communist and social sympathizers through his system. He appoints these Supreme Court justices who now take this radical revisionist understanding of American history. And as soon as FDR dies, Truman appoints more. And under this period of Democrats, then we create this Kritarchy system, which acts as a super legislature. And without any legislative power, it overthrows the entire segregation system, an extremely vulgar display of power, which has never happened in the history of the United States.
Sorry, just step back a second. Sorry, how did FDR lead to the rise of the Kritarchy? Because didn't he basically intimidate them into doing what he wanted them to do?
He was unable to until he was able to appoint it because it got locked into nine. So it gets locked into nine when they block him from doing what he wanted to do. So when it gets locked into the nine, then the Kritarchy is able to form because it is now completely independent of the power of the legislature to adjust its number, and that the legislature can't adjust its number, and the executive, the president, can't pack the court if the number can't be adjusted. So everybody on that court, the court can never be expanded, and everyone, as FDR dies, and all the people die there, and Truman continues on after FDR for 2 more terms. So all the people FDR would replace and all the people Truman would replace get their entire new Supreme Court of all these far left-wing people in what was previously considered by everyone but George Mason and Andrew Jackson as this kind of secondary, non-important form of government. Then it gets packed with all these people. It's cemented as a Kritarchy with this 9. It's packed completely by FDR and then completely by Truman. And now it has all these far left-wing activists in the Kritarchy, which we know in the 20th and 21st century, which is basically the head of state of the United States, which acts, according to Scalia, who is a member of the Supreme Court itself, is a super legislative actor. Then is able to ride roughshod over the legislature, over the entire federal system, over the executive, and decapitate under its own agency, under its own choice, acting as a completely super legislative body. It is able to decapitate the entire set of segregation, which we have to understand segregation. Let's go back. Can I go back to Civil War? Sorry if this is incoherent and I'm jumping all over the place.
No, go ahead.
It has a history degree in American history. So we have to understand the North won the Civil War, but the North couldn't cement its North didn't win the Civil War. It's a total victory. So the South gets occupied. We have these red shirts in the Reconstruction, the occupation of the South, who are able to.
Sorry, just a.
We have the red shirts in the KKK, who act as a guerrilla force against the occupying government. The occupying government of the radical Republicans uses the blacks as the uneducated black freed slaves as a cat's paw, disenfranchises all Southern whites, and then directly rules the South through carpetbaggers, enfranchised illiterate blacks into like this colonial system of military occupation. This is highly corrupt and leads to this guerrilla warfare of the KKK and the red shirts fighting blacks in this low intensity violence, which we should understand basically is a continuation of the Civil War. To a certain extent, the Democrats re-entered the system as the pro-slavery party and pro-Catholic party. And not pro-slavery party, the pro-white but also pro-Catholic party in the North for the Irish. And this party is able to gain support through the South, and the Democrats are effectively able to force an end to the Reconstruction military occupation of the South through an alliance between Northern Catholics and Southern whites. And they're able to force the Republican Party into retreat, end the Reconstruction era, the whites retake control, institute segregation to prevent what we have now, the mass rioting and uncontrollable black crime. So the whites are, through segregation, the whites establish an urban society, which is controlled by whites. And I don't understand why. And there's many factors to this, but we know this today, and it's some evolutionary thing within blacks. Is this? You might want to put this on BitChute if I'm going past the line, Arjun.
No, this deep in, it doesn't really matter.
Okay, so there's this thing. So every single country in Africa is incapable of supporting itself agriculturally, and blacks do not like to be agriculturalists. Is that correct?
No, that's true because there's some really good land in Africa, and theoretically it should be like an agricultural powerhouse. But yeah, you're right. I never really thought about it that way, but it's complete shit in pretty much every country there.
Blacks are basically incapable of doing agriculture, and I shouldn't say incapable. They have this instinctual
Above subsistence
hunching.
level, they can't.
What?
They
Above
can't.
subsistence level. They can't do capitalist agriculture. But for when we introduced industrialization after the end of colonialism in Africa, blacks abandoned subsistence agriculture or the possibility of capitalist agriculture and move en masse to these cities in Africa, and we're seeing this right now. And we need to understand what psychology makes blacks do this. And they're swarming the cities and creating these like Legos. They rather sit in complete squalor than farm. And this is the same thing in the United States. Blacks abandon the countryside en masse. Blacks have no interaction. This is something, this talking point is talked about a lot in VDare. In the writers on VDare,
Right.
where blacks do not like outdoor activities. Everybody knows the joke. Blacks don't swim. Blacks don't camp. Blacks don't go on hikes. That's pretty universal.
Mm-hmm.
Blacks prefer urban environments, and they swarm into cities when you ended segregation. And this happened before you ended segregation because the North didn't have segregation. So in the United States, because blacks prefer cities, you have the Great Migration. So let's look it up. The Great Migration, I believe, occurred during World War I. So the Great Migration is southern rural blacks in the 20th century swarming into northern cities, abandoning the countryside because blacks, I don't know why, have no interest being rural. Even if they have a small town, which is all black, they prefer to be in an urban setting, and I don't know why. Would you agree that this is pretty universal?
Yeah, someone's saying plenty of agriculture in Africa. Sorry, maybe not industrial farming. Well, a lot of them will do subsistence farming. So how did because there are cash crops in Africa like cocoa, or cacao. Is
From
that?
my understanding, it's still whites that run them and then hire blacks.
Oh, okay.
That blacks don't act as like there's no black kulaks. There's no such thing as a black kulak or a black yeoman.
Right.
There's either black subsistence farmers or black hired hands. There's never black yeoman or kulaks, if you will.
Right.
So, in order for the South to maintain an urban society of whites alongside the rural society of whites, they need to have segregation in place. The second half of the Civil War ends in this this rise of Jim Crow and segregation. Then let's go back forward to the rise of the Kritarchy. The Kritarchy acts as a super legislature which is able to use the power of the federal government, this federal supremacy clause, because you have to understand, until FDR came up, the federal government didn't intervene in state affairs, and that's what allowed segregation to happen. But FDR created this huge, massive federal government, ended the federal system in the United States, the traditional federal system in the United States, and created this massive, overarching bureaucracy, federal bureaucracy complex. And the justification to end segregation can be created through this Kritarchy and this end of the traditional federalism. So with the end of traditional federalism, you have the creation of this Kritarchy, and this Kritarchy, as soon as it's put in place, it specifically chooses to deconstruct segregation as a super legislature. So segregation is destroyed in the course of between 48 and 63, and ultimately, or 63, 64, through the super legislature, the Kritarchy. But ultimately, at the end, in the final death throes, when the South has no power to defend itself, at the very last moment, at the final end, then you have the Civil Rights Act of 64.
Sorry, I know we're not really talking about our personal ideologies. I'm just saying I'm somewhat favorable towards centralization to a strong federal government. So I don't necessarily disagree with what FDR did, although the outcome of it, bringing in the giving all power to the Supreme Court, was.
I'm speaking as a historian. I'm not speaking as Serp.
Right.
Sorry, I'm not speaking as an ideologue. I'm speaking as a historian.
Right. Okay.
So, and I'm trying to have. This is a history that you're very rarely going to hear. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I would say generally, you're very rarely going to hear this history, and I said pretty blunt stuff about blacks and agriculture, about how the North had a military dictatorship, things that aren't politically. You're not going to be taught in U.S. school, and you're not going to be taught in U.S. college. So you have to read around and bump into this and understand this. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Supreme Court acts as a super legislature, decapitates segregation, and then establishes. So then we go into the sexual revolution. Supreme Court legalizes pornography, and in the process legalizes child pornography. Supreme Court legalizes abortion. We have to I understand abortion as a form of birth control. In the former
was
Soviet
it illegal
Union,
prior to that?
As a form of birth control. How did abortion in the United States work before Roe versus Wade?
Yeah.
So Roe versus Wade is identical to the segregation issue, and we will never ever talk about this because conservatism. And conservatives will not understand history because racism bad, right? So, in every single state, the state government created a law under the American traditional federal system before the rise of this Kritarchy, which acts as a super legislature. So, if I could, see if I can find an abortion law map before 1970. Can you see if we can find a 1972 abortion law map?
Let me see here.
Because you can, state by state, abortion was chosen at the state level based on its legality, in the same way that segregation or anti-miscegenation laws were chosen. I found a map. Do you want me to send it to you?
Sure, and I'll put it up on screen.
I'll put it in the Discord chat if I can get that open here.
Okay.
I don't know why I'm sorry, I hate Discord boomer time.
You can send me it on
Facebook. In the chat here.
That would also be
put it in the chat or send it on Facebook.
Facebook's probably easier.
Okay, I put it in the chat and I'll send it on Facebook. So the vast majority of states in the United States actually banned abortion before 1972, but there were many states that had very wide open abortion. But I think Roe versus Wade made it more wide open than it was pretty universally. So,
isn't there a stronger anti-abortion movement now than there was prior to? Yeah.
I'll explain that in a minute.
Okay.
Tell me when you pull up the map and we'll talk about the map.
Okay. Okay. All right, get the map up.
Is it up on? I'm just waiting for it to be up for everyone else to see on the thing.
Yep, it's
So anyway, so you have the map up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if we look at this, all the yellow states, that's the current abortion law over the entire United States. All the green states, those are states which would allow abortion in case of like a black man with a white woman.
Rape,
These are abortions
incest,
on
women's
request.
health, likely.
What?
I have it in front of me. That's the normal exceptions. I'm just gonna call it that.
So the green law states are normal exceptions.
Which means 90, which means 2% or less of what we have now.
And blue and purple is what the Catholic Church wants, and red is more extreme than the Catholic Church.
Purple is rape.
Purple is rape, blue is danger to women's health.
Yep.
So a country like India or Poland or some parts of the Arab world, the Philippines, there are where blue and purple are usually.
Mm-hmm.
The more conservative countries worldwide with abortion. Red is more extreme than usually the Catholic Church. Red has no abortion whatsoever. No abortion whatsoever in all the red states here. And that's the majority of America, at least territory-wise.
Sorry. I was just going to say, personally, my position is in the green, but...
mine is probably in the blue. A legal and danger of cases that... I agree with Poland's laws. I'm not full...
I'm that way for pragmatic reasons.
Yeah, I believe it for pragmatic reasons. So anyway, so let's go. So this is abortion was allowed to be chosen state by state, but we can see that the yellow here is definitely rare before Roe versus Wade. So would you say
you're
that
insulting the great state? You're insulting the great state of Alaska.
Fuck Alaska.
But it's like it and Hawaii, and like they're like the three of the smallest states in New York. Is literally
Washington was a mid-level state at this time.
Oh, okay.
So we have Washington, a mid-level state, two of the smallest population states in New York. Would you say this is an outlier?
Yes.
So then Roe versus Wade acts as a super legislative body and then flips the entire thing to be the far left outlier. Does that sound tyrannical?
Yes.
And it does it in the exact same way it ends segregation. But Republicans, when they frame pro-life arguments, never try and talk about the Supreme Court as this dictatorship. Now, in this dictatorship, and we should abolish this Kritarchy. We should break its power first by packing the House. If I was a Republican, what I would want to do is, as soon as I have power of that, if we could get power of House and the Senate and the presidency, fuck it, let's pack the goddamn House. Or fuck it, let's pack the goddamn...
Also, wouldn't putting a bunch more justices dilute the power? And make...
Yes, it would dilute the power and it wouldn't be so powerful.
And then it wouldn't be every single time you have someone being elected, someone appointed, it's a nail biter that'll completely change the destiny of the country.
Yes. So, pro-lifers and Republicans will never formulate this idea of the dictatorship of the Kritarchy.
Sorry, if I can interrupt you once more. I've never heard a single one actually mention what it was prior to Roe v. Wade. Maybe
that it was highly it was even further right than most of them were.
No, but like I've never heard, they just say Roe v. Wade, but I've never heard a single one say that Roe v. Wade was that it was banned in most of America prior to Roe v. Wade.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't know, maybe you have. I've never heard anyone explain that to me. So it's very interesting that you bring that up.
And if we can find a map for gay marriage, it's the same exact map. Because gay marriage was illegal in almost every state before the Supreme Court super legislatively showed gay marriage to be legal.
Mhm.
So anyway, they never talk about this concept of the Kritarchy because then they have to be like, oh, racism, segregation, supreme legislature, abolishing the segregation with no power, and they should fucking do it because child pornography was legal in the United States because of the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court legalized pornography in the same exact fashion that legalized abortion and ended segregation. In action, it's the supreme legislature, which stands over the legislature and stands over the executive, is the true rulers of this nation.
Okay, here's the issue with the gay marriage thing. Because um the local courts struck it down in almost all cases. The map they have, it was legal in the majority of states or semi-legal.
No, Arjun, it wasn't. This is because it was a period of time. It was multiple cases that made gay marriage legal. There was a point in time before that happened. If we could find the map,
Okay, I'm just saying.
that's not true. The Supreme Court. It was a period of multiple years where the Supreme Court legalized it. So for Montana had a constitutional amendment which banned gay marriage. That constitutional amendment within Montana was overthrown in an earlier.
No, that's what I mean.
done
I'm
in a
trying to
single
find
case.
a map that covers that because the map I found is the current one.
Is the final one
Yeah.
before?
Um, just keep going. I'll see what I can find.
So anyway, the Supreme Court acts as a super legislative body, legalizes pornography, ends segregation, legalizes abortion. Okay, and it continues to act this way. And Republicans and in this period, it also ends the death penalty, ends executions. So in the 70s, the United States became an abolitionist state through an activist Supreme Court, the same activist Supreme Court, which ended segregation, legalized abortion, and legalized pornography. Also ended the death
I put
sentence.
something on screen. Tell me if that's what you were thinking of.
It's black. I can't see it right now. I'll just have to wait. So anyway, Reagan does eventually come to power. This is the map I'm thinking of. This is the exact map. Notice how the majority of states don't have gay marriage before the Supreme Court.
I do think a majority of the population, though.
Majority of the population, but would you say that almost a large majority of the red states and some blue states have no gay marriage?
Yes. Even further, also civil unions are banned.
Mm-hmm. So Montana was the state where civil unions were legal, but gay marriage was banned.
Mm-hmm. Someone is saying that you're saying child pornography only exists because pornography was legalized. So when they legalized pornography, they legalized all pornography, including child pornography?
So child pornography was illegal to create, but it was legal to distribute. If that makes sense. So let's say...
How did that change?
Well, now it's illegal to distribute.
But doesn't that go against...
It's the Supreme Court. It can do whatever we want, and that it just does whatever we want. It doesn't make
so
sense.
they
like
sorry. So I'm just trying to. So they ignored the previous precedent.
They changed the precedent, so they made child porn. They just said child pornography is child abuse, even if you didn't film it yourself.
Even though we previously stated all pornography.
Distribution is also now distribution is considered child abuse. Okay.
They just made it up.
Previously, distribution was not considered child abuse, which meant that child pornography could be distributed if you couldn't track down who created it, and there was no direct connect. The person who created it didn't distribute it. So if the distributor just found it, it essentially made child pornography legal in the same way that marijuana isn't legal in like the Netherlands, but it's legal in the Netherlands through weird conflicting court stuff. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So the Supreme Court in this period legalizes pornography, and at the same time, with that, legalizes child pornography. Eventually, Reagan retakes control. Reagan has a Supreme Court. He appoints his own Supreme Court justices, and those Supreme Court justices in the '80s start to fight back. They don't throw back Roe versus Wade, and this is where the feminist death march, the vote for the crypt keeper Biden to keep your pussies so that you can rip out your babies out of you, kill your children. The feminist death call march comes up of the Roe versus Wade screams, because Reagan's Supreme Court ends child pornography and reinstitutes the death sentence. So then Reagan appoints his own Kritarchy, which starts fighting back against the left-wing Kritarchy.
Oh, sorry. One more quick thing just on the gay marriage thing. I found a better map. So that's a map, I don't know if it's up state, where it shows states where it was legalized by referendums or the legislator, states where it was legalized by the courts, and states where it wasn't legal prior to the Supreme Court. Is it up for you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at that.
The only states that personally selected gay marriage then, because California selected it and then chose to no longer have gay marriage by popular vote.
Yeah, it was
so the
banned.
only states which have chosen gay marriage without a Kritarchy are Washington, Hawaii, Minnesota, Illinois, Maryland, Delaware, New York. New Jersey did not choose to have gay marriage by its own power. Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, and Rhode Island. Massachusetts, New Jersey,
even
and
some
California
dark blue
and
states.
Oregon did not choose on their own accord to have gay marriage. So anyway, Supreme Court acts as a super legislature again, over the top of the states in the same way, legalizes gay marriage. So now the Supreme Court is a super legislature which can push the country wherever it wants, and it holds power above both the executive and the legislature in this special status in the history of the world that was created by the United States. And if you went through in Latin America, and Latin American countries have copied this, where their oligarchies have said the legislature is too slow to act as our ability to take power. Mm-hmm. And they have chosen to form Supreme Courts, just like countries are now choosing to form Supreme Courts so that they can have a Kritarchy which overrules the legislature and chooses progressive, super elitist causes for them. To copy the United States system of
because I think what happened is all the Latin American countries signed on to some international Supreme Court, and it ruled that gay marriage was legal. So even in countries where like 80% of the population is against it, they still forced it legal. And then the public are kind of like sheep. So what I've noticed is they're very strongly against it often until it becomes legal, and then there's overwhelming support for it.
Mm-hmm. That's what happened with abortion. But and that's where you asked about that. So initially there's overwhelming support for abortion, but abortion is so disgusting and so terrifying that if you show a process, you can't. It's very rare. Maybe 1 out of 100 people that was pro-choice, you could show them what abortion is, and they would continue to be pro-choice. It's explicitly like a felony to spread information about how abortions work in the United States.
Because, I mean, the first time I saw one, it made me like much, much more pro-life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
I think anti-sodomy laws were overturned through the Supreme Court as well, but I have to check that.
Yeah, so like in Colombia, it was 28%. Actually, Colombia passed a constitutional amendment defining marriages between a man and a woman, and the Supreme Court overruled it and legalized it. I actually
Okay,
prefer.
yes, the Supreme Court acts as a super legislature. It's called Lawrence versus Texas.
I actually prefer popular sovereignty to the Kritarchy, like by a lot.
So Montana, bestiality was illegal, and then the Supreme Court legalized it in Lawrence versus Thomas.
Right.
So, do you want to see this map of all the one? I'll send you another map I found here of the United States, the super legislative power of the Kritarchy. I'll send it to you on Facebook. So all the pink is sodomy that the Supreme Court legalized, and all the dark red is homosexuality because all the red and dark red here, homosexuality was illegal in that state. Those were anti-sodomy laws or full-on sodomy laws. So that
Sorry,
would
what
be
was pink?
a man and woman.
Oh,
Pink is anti-bestiality laws. The Supreme Court in the United States acts as a super legislature and legalize bestiality.
So is bestiality
and from my
legal?
understanding, bestiality was illegal on the state level, and then the Supreme Court legalized it.
No, I mean, is it currently legal?
Yeah, it's legal now.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So basically, every state, bestiality was illegal.
And then the Supreme Court legalized, just like the Supreme Court legalized child pornography.
So they haven't like changed their mind and said, in the We the People, animals aren't included, so therefore bestiality is actually bad.
Well, then they couldn't. So Canada is copying the United States and forming its own Kritarchy, right? And then they legalize bestiality through that, from my understanding.
Yeah, the issue in Canada is our government is about as radical as the Supreme Court, or it's a lot closer.
So the Kritarchy can't break. It wouldn't even matter.
I mean, the Kritarchy, I think, I couldn't figure it out. I think the Kritarchy banned the national anthem. Because there was, like, a lawsuit, some, like, atheists. There's a word that starts with the letter F that I can't say on YouTube. But
so in the United States, states were able to reword it. So states have been allowed to re-legalize bestiality in the United States after this decision.
Because
But for a time, all bestiality laws bestiality was legalized across the United States by the Supreme Court.
But because our national anthem says "God keep our land," so some atheists brought it, I think, to the Supreme Court that it was, and then they like found that national anthem was unconstitutional or something. I know they did find saying the Lord's Prayer before town council meetings was unconstitutional. So there is that aspect to it, but yeah.
Did you show them the bestiality and
I just taken it down. Yep.
Okay. I don't see it on the thing, but the chat might be.
Oh, I took it down.
Okay. So, yep. I think that this speaks for itself, that we're living under this tyranny of this Kritarchy. I don't think there's any more to say. They act as this direct pawn of this oligarchy, because we had the rise, because I talked about in modernism, and maybe they're not connected yet, the rise of the modern world, where you have the oligarchy rise through the power in the creation of liberal democracies, in taking power where you have this merchant class, which takes power in the form of the legislature as they rise. But now this merchant class has become this huge international bourgeoisie, if you will.
Now, by merchant, you mean merchants and not just lizard
international lizard people merchants. And that instead of ruling people over legislatures as the national merchants of the past did, these internationalist merchants are increasingly being able to rule countries through Kritarchy.
Which is a lot more efficient because there's far fewer people to bribe.
Mm-hmm.
So, I kind of, maybe I'm more I don't know if I'm more or less black-pilled than you. I believe regardless of what happens in the election, the Supreme Court will vote against Trump.
Do you think that I think that would be more black-pilled than me. I
Um,
feel that this. I feel if the Florida thing happened, I think that the Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices would vote for Trump.
except for Roberts, and he'd be the spring vote.
Roberts might
He'd be the swing vote.
to vote to put Biden in office in a clearly crisis.
Yeah, like what the fuck was the like Obamacare like where they kind of overturned it but not really, and then it was like isn't it like in legal limbo now or something?
I don't know. I don't. It's too complex for me to understand.
It's like the Trump impeachment. No one knows what that was even about.
Mm-hmm.
I think that actually hurt the Democrats a lot because like
The impeachment.
yeah,
Well,
because
it made the opposition to Trump feel absurd and meaningless
well,
because no one understood what the impeachment was about, and you can't describe what happened in the impeachment without it taking 5 minutes. Okay, I can describe what happened with Nixon's impeachment and Clinton's impeachment, regardless of how like partisan both of them were, and they're very transparently partisan, even for Nixon,
mhm.
and how much of a partisan joke it was. But like for Trump, it's even more of a partisan joke, but you can't even describe it in a minute. It takes 5 whole minutes to describe it.
Like I don't get why they didn't try to impeach him on like an abuse of power or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like that would at least make sense. Okay, so someone's saying Thomas, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Alito will side, and the other.
Hopefully, this woman, if she can be forced through, we can have the United States become a banana republic, and she'll put Trump back into the presidency.
Mm-hmm. Um,
This kangaroo court of bullshit. And do you think the United States is like starting to like bend under the weight of the coronavirus? It's like being under a bridge that's about to collapse, and you can hear it bend with the wind. That's what it feels like to me. But
I mean, I maintain America did like the most bizarre, like the worst response. Um, Honestly, I think you guys, because there was no chance of doing like what Canada or Italy or any like the more, I guess, united countries would do, which was just have a full national lockdown. Um, it might have been better to just go for herd immunity and just isolate the older people. Because I don't know. Like, I still just don't know, like, anything about the whole thing. Like, was it just the flu? How many people actually died in China? Like, I don't know. But, like, part of it is it, like, does Trump appoint, like, really moderate justices because, like, that's just how he is? Or does he do it because they're the only
that's
ones?
who can get through.
Yeah.
I have this feeling that like there's a so there's I don't know if I didn't describe this for Supreme Court justices. There's one type of left wing justice, and that is the active, progressive, activist judge
Hmm.
who just chooses things and believes their role is to be a super legislature. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg clearly believed that she could act as I think Kagan and Sotomayor have said explicitly they act in that role. So they do explicitly believe the Supreme Court is a super legislature which chooses things for the nation and enforces it on it.
Right.
So we have the activist type, which all left-wing judges are going, all Democrat-appointed judges are. But Republican judges can either be activists, and Clarence Thomas is an activist who believe in natural law, or you can have the textualist or originalist variety who believe in precedent. And the majority of Republican appointed justices aren't like Clarence Thomas, who say natural law, the law of God, is what matters, and will be activists for our side. We have people that believe in precedent, so they maintain the previous precedents that have been established by the activist judges of the left.
Mm-hmm. Was it?
I personally believe that we should only appoint natural law judges and understand the Kritarchy as a Kritarchy, or take control of the Senate and the House and the presidency and then pack the Kritarchy, smash its power.
Could you just
Or
pack the?
simply do a Jackson, take a military, become a military dictator, and openly ignore
Or
the
you could
Supreme
pull
Court.
a Perot and just.
Perón did the same thing as Jackson.
Well, he just no. I think he impeached all the entire Supreme Court, and then it just ceased to exist.
Well, do you personally believe in a Supreme Court?
No.
I don't believe in a Supreme Court.
The the idea Sun Yat-sen had was interesting. He thought there should be a branch of the government whose only power was impeachment,
Mm-hmm.
and it wouldn't be part of the judicial branch. Um, I don't know about that. It was just an interesting idea he had. Because I think there has to be some way to remove corrupt politicians from power, but the
I
Supreme
think
Court,
the legislature can remove a president. I'm fine with that. I'm
right?
just not fine with this Kritarchy, which is above the president and the legislature.
Right. Because they are the Senate.
They're not the Senate. They're the law.
They
They're
are.
the fucking Judge Dredd that goes around legalizing child porn and bestiality.
It's Someone points out George W. Bush is a better president than Reagan because he appointed um, Clarence.
Clarence. I guess so.
I mean, did Reagan give us Kennedy?
Um, Reagan? Yeah, Reagan gave us Kennedy.
Did he
It might have
do
been
Scalia?
the first Bush. Reagan did Scalia, though.
Okay, so I guess it's kind of like a toss up. Uh, I never hear anything about Alito. Isn't he relatively good?
I think he's the best other than Clarence Thomas.
Right. I actually think John Roberts might. Well, it's because he's a Judas, and nobody likes a Judas.
Yeah. I think that we covered it. Does anybody have any questions for us?
Uh huh. Someone says that's what Taiwan has. Someone's saying, Argent, you're not pro life. I never said that. I just said, I don't think you can practically ban abortion in the case of rape. I just don't think that's possible. And I'd be happy if we just banned elective abortion, which is 98
What
plus
is
percent.
Poland's laws?
Um, Let me just look at it.
Poland, rape. When a woman's life or any form of health is in jeopardy and when the fetus is irreparably damaged. So Poland allows you to abort for disabled and retarded children. Poland allows you, if the woman's life is in danger, Poland allows rape. I'm fine. That's fine for me. I can't impose on non-religious people having Down syndrome children. And that if you impose having Down, because the reason that abortion was legalized in Ireland is because the Irish government did the right-wing slippery slope and had a total abortion ban and forced people to take care of Down syndrome children. And then what ended up happening is because Ireland became so fucking left-wing and so cuckolded, so horrible, they fell from grace from God, and God is punishing them like he punished the Jews with the Babylonian exile. The anti-abortion crowd ran as a civil rights platform for Down syndrome people.
Well, I mean, and
The entire platform against abortion in Ireland in the referendum was support the illegalization of abortion because you're taking away the rights of Down syndrome. So the people who ran in support of in opposition to full, absolute, complete legal abortion they did so by saying, I want you to be forced to take care of a Down syndrome child. I can't, in good conscience, force people to take care of retarded children and highly disabled children. And if you're going to do that and you're going to force that on people, then those people will rebel and they're going to ask for a complete and open abortion law.
Well, I think it's kind of the same thing with rape. I don't know, people seem
rape to a certain extent, but there's more people that are forced to take care of Downies than are raped.
No, I'm just saying I think there is a difference. I think you can be a decent person and support it in the case of rape. I think if you support it electively, you're garbage. But I'm not saying it's not a life. I'm not saying it's not murder. I just think it is a morally more complicated.
Oh, it is murder. I'm not going. It is murder to murder a Downy, but you can't force somebody who's raped or force them to be a Downy without them buckling and rebelling. If you're forcing them to have that child, and I understand that clearly. I understand it's still murder, but if you're going to impose that on people, then they're going to want free legal abortion. And that is what those snakes that are for abortion, they have to use rape. You have to understand that the average woman who is for abortion, they think that almost all abortions are rape, incest, and people they're stuck with.
I need to do a stream or a video because I found the statistics on it. It's less than 2% if you added all of the things they bring up together.
Yes.
But
that's what they openly, all women who walk around are 90% of women, unless that they're fanatical feminists, the normal women, the normal girl on the street who says she's pro-choice, the reason she does is she believes that almost all abortions are rape, incest, and being forced to take care of a retarded child.
I mean, I don't know, there's a couple people in the chat who are saying
I betrayed God. I betrayed God.
That we betrayed the Catholic Church, that sort of thing.
Is it better if you're a monarchist in Spain to call for the Carlists to return and side with the Republicans against the current monarchy? Don't make the good the enemy of the perfect.
I don't know. I mean,
really sidetracked here.
I mean, I'd be really happy if 98% of them went away.
Don't make the perfect the enemy of the good.
But so hasn't she said she's not going to vote against Roe versus Wade?
Well, she won't because she's a precedentist. Well, Roe versus Wade will never be overturned until you have until you overturn the Kritarchy. The Kritarchy is always going to side with Roe versus Wade.
I think of them, probably only Alito and Clarence Thomas would vote. Or would Kavanaugh, or is he
Kavanaugh would vote for Roe versus Wade.
He
would vote for it, I believe. He would maintain it. And he said so, and Gorsuch, I believe, said so.
Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, part of me just kind of wants to... Because that was kind of my argument for why you should go and vote for Trump, was Supreme Court picks. And it's just, whenever it happens, it just makes me, say, does it really matter? But I still think the Republican ones are less likely to bring in hate speech laws.
Well, hate speech laws they can act, but they can also re-legalize child pornography. They could legalize child pornography or lower the universal age of consent to 12.
I have my doubts that hate speech will become hate speech laws will become constitutional so long as there's a Republican majority on the Supreme Court.
Yes, but they can do hate speech. They can legalize child pornography. They can lower the age of consent to 10. They can legalize bestiality a second time. They can do all kinds of things if they take control.
No, I'm just
you have to remember that gun rights are also a thing. They can take away gun rights through the Supreme Court. If the Democrats had enough justices, they could abolish the Second Amendment. They could interpret the Second Amendment to be the creation of a military. And they already interpreted that themselves, that the militia is the National Guard, and that the Second Amendment is for the creation of a National Guard. It's not for people having weapons to defend themselves as people as part of natural law or natural rights. They believe that the Second Amendment creates the ability of the state, which the National Guard is part of. There was a point before 1906 where the militaries were under control of the state. The National Guard was under control of the state. That flipped over. National Guard is part of the federal government. But the Supreme Court, if it was ruled by liberals, they would completely abandon the right to bear arms. If we had a 5 liberal Supreme Court, a 5 activist liberal Supreme Court, and they would revoke that, say the Second Amendment is explicitly for the formation of National Guards.
I think they'd revoke
the Supreme Court would revoke the Second Amendment whole scale.
They'd revoke what's left of the First Amendment.
They would revoke what's left of the First Amendment. They could revoke the whole Fourth Amendment, or what's left of the Fourth Amendment.
What's the Fourth Amendment again?
Search and seizures.
Right. So, I think that's the reason. I don't know. I just am I feel like we've kind of thrown in with Trump for good or bad. And the least you can do is just go vote for him. Like, I get it. He sucks. He's done a lot of, he's failed on a lot of things. I've kind of defended him throughout just because he's surrounded by Judases who have, been stabbing him in the back, every 5 seconds and undermining him. But, I don't know. Do you really want Biden in power? Do you really want that dude with his hands on the nuclear football? And I mean, I think you can make the same argument once again for McCain. It's not a partisan thing. That Obama is a lot. Fritz, don't take the "I'm not going to vote" thing. I get it where you live; it doesn't matter. But it's very. I don't know. I just find it childish. What do you think, Serp?
Why would you give up something that's free? Voting is free. Why would you not do it? Every other form of political advocacy costs either A, time, or B, you spending money. Voting takes no time, virtually no time, and B, takes no money.
Do they legally have to give you time to vote in the States?
I actually know, but...
Oh, because no, I know in Canada you're allowed up to 4 hours to vote.
In the United States, no. That's one of the things in the United States is certain states are blue states. So Pennsylvania is a blue state because their polls close at 5, and people aren't able to make it at 5 to vote for Republicans. People that actually work. I'm not kidding, dude. I'm not kidding.
No, I'm sure. No, I'm sure that's true. Fritz is saying that he's legitimizing democracy if he votes. I don't know. He's not here to defend himself. I think our friend Torellian just goes and votes for the Christian Heritage Party.
I mean, you could vote for you could vote for Mike Enoch if you want,
or the Constitution Party.
So.
Well, just go vote for the Constitution Party, or
if you're an extreme Protestant, vote the Prohibition Party.
Yeah. So I don't know. We're probably getting into fights with my viewer base now, but that maybe
I think that we've gotten in too many with the viewer base now.
Maybe that's just the way I was raised to always vote. I don't know. Anyways, I think that covers everything for the moment. Thanks for coming on, man. That was a wild ride we went down.
Yep.
So, yeah, try to stay safe, man. It's fucking crazy out there.
Okay.
God
I'll see
bless.
you.
Okay, everybody. So that's the stream. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully, there'll be a couple days before the next stream or the next video. But there is two versions of the debate live stream up. One has the pre-stream removed. The other one has the pre-stream. There actually is a full pre-stream where Serp, Beckloff, and I talk for about an hour and a half. So you can do that if you want.